There's a moment in every person's life when clarity finally cuts through the noise. You've probably had people around you. You trusted them. You shared your thoughts, your plans, your fears. You thought they were real, present, honest. But time has a strange way of revealing truth. Not all at once, subtly, gradually, until one day hits you. They were never real. They were acting, playing roles, saying what sounded right. And God, whether you call it divine wisdom energy or the higher order of reality, lets you see it, not to break you, but to build you. Let's understand this neurologically. The brain is wired for pattern recognition. When we ignore the red flags, it's often not because we're blind. It's because we're conditioned to prioritize connection over truth. But when you evolve, when your prefrontal cortex strengthens through reflection, you begin to see patterns of inconsistency, of emotional dishonesty, of manipulation. And that vision at that moment of awareness is the gift. It's not betrayal. It's liberation. Now, here's the part no one talks about. Your nervous system carries the weight of fake people. The moment you cut them off, not in anger, but in clarity, your body changes. Cortisol drops. Your heart rate variability improves. You sleep deeper. You focus better. That's not just spiritual. It's biological proof that truth heals. God isn't showing you how fake they were to make you bitter. He's showing you so you never settle again. So you never question your intuition again. So you build boundaries based on evidence, not emotion. And when the veil drops, don't be surprised. Don't run. Feel it. Learn from it. Then rise. Because the moment you stop tolerating fakeness, you create space for people who are real. And that is when everything starts to change. One of the most difficult truths to come to terms with is that clarity rarely arrives when we want it to. We expect that the people we let into our lives, those we trust, care for, and confide in, will show us their true nature early on. We want honesty to be immediate. But in reality, truth reveals itself slowly, often painfully so, and almost always through time. It's not because we're blind or naive. It's because our brains are biologically wired to prioritize connection, familiarity, and security over the uncomfortable realities of human behavior. In the early stages of any relationship, whether it's friendship, family, or romance, the brain relies heavily on emotional cues, dopamine-driven motivation, and the comforting illusion of consistency. We create mental models of the people around us. We give them roles, identities, expectations. And our brains do this for efficiency, to reduce uncertainty, to predict how people will act, to avoid constant vigilance. This is adaptive, but it also makes us vulnerable. When someone is fake, when they're projecting a version of themselves that's inauthentic or manipulative, they usually don't drop their mask all at once. Their inconsistencies are subtle. Maybe they praise you in public, but criticize you in private. Maybe they show up when things are good, but disappear when you need them most. At first, your nervous system registers something off, but your mind overrides it. We rationalize, we excuse, we tell ourselves stories that fit the illusion we've created. This isn't foolishness. It's survival. But with time, the weight of inconsistency becomes impossible to ignore. The signals don't go away. In fact, they multiply. The brain starts registering patterns that can't be explained away. Micro-expressions, changes in tone, patterns in behavior, small betrayals that build into bigger ones. And eventually a moment comes when the entire picture becomes clear. What once seemed cloudy and confusing now stands out with painful certainty. The truth breaks through the story, and it's undeniable. This process, this unveiling, isn't random. There's a reason truth reveals itself slowly. That's the moment when the mind, no longer able to suppress the cognitive dissonance, starts connecting dots. That's when we move from confusion to clarity, and from tolerance to awareness. You begin to notice not just what someone says, but how they say it, when they say it, and whether their behavior consistently backs it up. You see the patterns they hoped you'd never recognize. You start remembering the times your intuition tried to tell you something wasn't right, but you ignored it for the sake of peace. This realization isn't dramatic. It doesn't always come with confrontation. Often, it's quiet. It arrives in the middle of a conversation, or in the silence after a call. You hear the tone underneath the words. You remember the small lie they told that didn't make sense. You realize how the story keeps changing. You notice how they always shift blame. And now, instead of brushing it aside, your mind holds on to it. It observes. It no longer tries to protect the illusion. It tries to protect you. What's fascinating about this process is that it isn't just emotional, it's biological. Your body feels it too. Your nervous system begins to respond. The tension in your chest when you see their name pop up. The way your breathing changes around them. The tightness in your jaw when they speak. These are not random sensations. They are your body's way of processing information your conscious mind may not have been ready to confront. But once your mental clarity and your physical intuition align, it becomes impossible to ignore. You've seen too much, you've felt too much. The spell breaks. What follows is often a mix of emotions: sadness, anger, confusion, and even grief. You're mourning not just the person, but the version of them you believed in. You're coming to terms with the gap between who they pretended to be and who they truly are. And in that moment, even though it hurts, a shift occurs. You begin to trust your own perception more. You begin to believe what you see, not just what you were told, and you stop negotiating with your instincts. Seeing through someone isn't just about recognizing their fakeness. It's about reclaiming your own clarity. It's about realizing that you're capable of tracking truth through patterns, not with suspicion, but with presence. You're learning that people can wear masks for years, but the human nervous system, the combination of brain and body, eventually catches what the eyes were too hopeful to see. And when that happens, you don't need proof or permission. You've seen enough, and from that point on, you stop playing along. Truth doesn't need to shout. It simply needs to be seen. And once it is, your life begins to shift, not because they changed, but because you finally did. Of course, here is an expanded version of Keynote 3 in the tone of Andrew Huberman, grounded in neuroscience, emotion, and personal truth. It is approximately 700 words, reflective, and without keywords or subheadings. There's something quietly destructive about being surrounded by people who are emotionally dishonest, manipulative, or performative. You don't always notice it at first, because the effects are subtle. But over time, your nervous system bears the weight of that presence. It adjusts, compensates, tolerates. And you begin to live in a state of quiet stress, constantly regulating around energy that doesn't feel safe or steady. What people rarely understand is that the body knows before the mind does. You may not have the language to describe what's wrong, but you feel it in your breath, in your heart rate, in your digestion, in your sleep. Being around fake people is more than frustrating. It's physically exhausting. There's a scientific explanation for this. When you interact with someone who is emotionally unstable, passive-aggressive, or inconsistent, your brain activates its threat detection system. The amygdala, the part of the brain responsible for scanning for danger, becomes more engaged. Your sympathetic nervous system, designed to prepare you for action, subtly shifts into overdrive. Your cortisol levels increase, even if just slightly, and your body begins to operate in a state of anticipation. Not fear in the dramatic sense, but vigilance, waiting, watching, measuring the gap between what they say and what they mean, monitoring whether you're safe to be yourself or whether you need to adjust, shrink, stay small. This ongoing adjustment is costly. You start second-guessing your words, walking on emotional eggshells. You edit your authenticity to avoid triggering their judgment or dismissal. And all of this happens quietly under the surface until it becomes normal. But normal doesn't mean healthy. Normal doesn't mean sustainable. The body begins to pay the price. You may feel more tired after being around them, or notice that your energy dips for hours, or even days afterward. This is not weakness. It's a physiological response to emotional dissonance. When you finally recognize how fake someone has been, there's a kind of release that occurs, not just in your thinking, but in your body. The muscles you didn't realize were tensed begin to soften. The hyper-awareness you lived with begins to fade, your breathing deepens, your sleep improves. Your thoughts stop looping through old conversations, trying to decode them. This isn't just emotional relief, it's your nervous system recalibrating itself after no longer having to defend against a subtle form of threat. It's healing, and what's important to understand is that fake people often rely on subtlety. They aren't always cruel or obvious in their behavior. They may smile, compliment you, share moments of apparent connection, but something always feels off, and that offness builds over time. You feel more drained than energized after interactions. You notice you feel better when they're not around. These aren't coincidences. They're data. Your nervous system has been collecting it. Your body doesn't lie, even when people do. The beautiful part of this process, of recognizing the toll that emotional dishonesty takes on your body, is that it changes how you relate to yourself. You start trusting your signals more. You stop silencing the discomfort. You no longer dismiss your own reactions in favor of keeping the peace. You realize that peace that comes at the cost of your well-being isn't peace at all. It's just suppression. And you begin to choose differently. You might feel guilt for distancing yourself, especially if that person once mattered to you. You may worry about overreacting or being unkind. But the truth is, your decision to protect your nervous system, to honor your body's signals, is not about revenge. It's about restoration. You're not cutting people off to hurt them. You're stepping away to heal you. You're giving your body space to exhale after holding tension for far too long. Over time, as you live with more authenticity, you start noticing the difference between people who drain you and those who regulate you. People who are consistent, safe, emotionally available. They don't trigger the same internal alarms. You feel relaxed in their presence. You feel seen without having to explain yourself. You feel like your body can rest because it no longer has to perform or protect. And that's the quiet miracle of truth. It doesn't just change your thoughts, it changes your physiology. And the more you align your life with that truth, the more your body and your mind begin to feel like home again. Certainly. The people who are real won't need performance or manipulation. They'll offer you something simple, but rare: consistency, honesty, safety. So yes, it hurts to see the truth, but it hurts more to keep living a lie. And when that pain turns into purpose, when you decide to let the truth remake you instead of break you, you step into the kind of power that no one can take from you again. The truth didn't come to ruin your life. It came to return it to you. Certainly. Here is the expanded version of Keynote 5, written in a reflective and neuroscience-aligned tone in the style of Andrew Huberman, grounded, thoughtful, and emotionally intelligent. Approximately 700 words without any keywords or subheadings. There's a moment that quietly arrives after you've processed the shock, the pain, and the disappointment of realizing someone was never authentic with you. It's the moment where you no longer need to prove anything to anyone, where you stop trying to explain yourself, defend yourself, or even convince others of what you've seen. That moment is not loud or dramatic. It's calm, grounded, and unshakable. That moment is when boundaries are born, not as walls, but as clarity. And clarity is what reshapes your entire relationship with connection. When you've experienced deception or manipulation, your first instinct may be to question yourself. It's normal. You replay the conversations. You look for where you might have misunderstood. You wonder if maybe you were too sensitive, too harsh, too suspicious. But as the emotional storm begins to settle, what remained isn't doubt. It's data. You realize the signs were always there. You just weren't ready to honor them. This isn't about becoming guarded or cold. It's about becoming honest with yourself first. It's the decision to no longer abandon your instincts just to maintain a connection. It's the quiet courage to recognize that love, friendship, loyalty, none of it is real if it requires the betrayal of your own needs. And once you've crossed that threshold, once you've seen how much of yourself you gave in exchange for their approval or presence, you start to reclaim what you lost. You begin building something stronger than trust in others. You begin building trust in yourself. It's subtle at first. You stop answering messages that make your stomach tighten. You no longer feel obligated to meet up with people who leave you feeling worse, not better. You say no, not as a weapon, but as a truth. You say yes, only when it feels aligned, not out of guilt. These are not acts of rebellion. They are acts of self-respect. And they change everything. People often misunderstand boundaries. They think boundaries are about pushing people away. But in reality, they're about drawing closer to what's true. You're not creating distance out of fear. You're creating space for authenticity. You're no longer willing to compromise your peace just to keep people comfortable. You're no longer willing to silence what you know for the sake of being liked. And the moment you make that internal decision, everything around you begins to shift. Some people will fall away. That's not failure. It's filtration. The ones who are only in your life because they benefited from your silence, your compliance, your confusion, those people can't stay when you become clear. And as painful as that can be, it's also necessary. Because once you stop tolerating what you used to accept, You're not just protecting yourself from future harm, you're creating space for healthier, more reciprocal relationships to emerge. The most interesting part of this process is how your nervous system responds. When you're no longer living in emotional confusion, when you're no longer questioning whether you're imagining things, your body settles. Your anxiety begins to fade. Your energy returns. Your thoughts sharpen. You begin to feel safe, not because everything around you is perfect, but because you've created internal boundaries that no longer allow chaos to take root. That shift isn't theoretical. It's physiological. Your body recognizes truth. It thrives in it. Over time, these boundaries become less effortful. They become a natural part of who you are. You don't need to defend them. You don't need to explain them. They just exist quietly, clearly. And those who are meant to be in your life will recognize them not as rejection, but as an invitation to meet you where you are, not where they want to keep you. And maybe the greatest lesson in all of this is that your clarity is not something to apologize for. It's something to honor. Seeing the truth doesn't make you bitter. It makes you real. Living with boundaries doesn't make you hard. It makes you whole. And from that place, you stop chasing peace and begin embodying it. The people who are meant for you won't fear your clarity. They'll feel safe in it. Because clarity isn't what pushes people away. It's what finally allows the right ones to come close.